was told I was going to have to keep this one short as far as the intro. We have 60 something images tonight, so
Oh my
64.
God.
So we'll keep the I'll keep the opening comments fairly brief. That's right. There you go. So again, thank you everybody for showing up tonight. We've got a good in-person here audience, and we've got several people who are still joining us here on Zoom. Thank you for those who entered in this month's competition. Again, this one is a themed competition. We do, I think, 3 of those per year, and this one it's leading lines. So interesting to see what we see up there tonight on the leading lines category. And also a huge thank you to Cheryl Opperman for coming in and judging. More information on Cheryl here in a few minutes. That's where the opening will get a little bit longer. Just want to go through some of the other upcoming events in that we have. We have April 16th, we have event photography with Steve Dessenhoff, and that one is presenting on Zoom only. We will be meeting in person, but the presenter will be over Zoom. Let's see, May 7th, we have exhibition night. Again, that's where submit up to 4 images. For those who haven't participated in that before, 4 images. They don't get judged, but you get to share information about what made the photo important to you, what it means to you, anything special about it as far as post-processing. And then we open it up to the audience just to offer ideas, suggestions in that on the images. So that's May 7th. May 21st, we have a presentation on Galapagos Island with Roger Frame. That one, the presenter is here in person. That one is May 21st. And then we have our annual project that begins June 1st and ends on July 20th. So again, there's a lot more information on that out on the website, but again, a fun opportunity to, start thinking now about a project that you want to do, special project, take images throughout that period. I think we're allowing up to 8 that go into the submission from that project. And then let's see, the last ones you take would be by July 20th. And then it is on July 23rd where we'll have our meeting. It's a Zoom only meeting, but we'll do an image review of the everybody's project images.
Is there a thing?
The theme is up to you. You can pick your theme on that one.
Oh,
So it's a project, like a personal project. Try and think of something that's maybe a little bit different than what you always do. So you might want to pick something different than birds, for instance, like, find something else that you want to, over a period of time, learn a little bit more about, study, take images of that over that period, and then share this. So the idea is to kind of come up with something that maybe you don't do a whole lot of, but are interested in learning more about.
I think it's kind of a brilliant idea, because if you ever submitted to a gallery or a magazine, having a series is what you want. So whatever the topic is, treat it like you're going to try to get into a gallery showing or a magazine or something like that.
Because the images have to be taken between that June 1st and that July 20th, 21st.
Right. They have, take them during that period. You can start thinking now about what you're going to do, but the actual capture dates would be between that. About Cheryl, like I say, when Cheryl comes in, visits us, we're always, she's had great programs for us and has judged for us in the past, but it's a lengthy bio, so I'm going to try and go through that pretty quickly here. Cheryl's a nationally acclaimed nature photographer who's traveled to every continent in the world, capturing spectacular images of nature, wildlife, indigenous cultures. Her photographs have been widely published, appearing in print, on the web, television, and in solo and group exhibits. Her list of clients and credits include the American Humane Association, Overseas Adventure Travel, the Denver Post, National Geographic Society, Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and I'm sure many others. Her aesthetic compositions, artistic use of light, and exquisite detail have been honored with several prestigious awards from organizations such as Earth Day Network, Nature's Best Photography, the International Photography Awards, and National Wildlife Federation. There's a second page on Cheryl's here. So let's see here. She was featured as a leading female nature photographer by Outdoor Photographer magazine and has appeared in on-camera interviews by 9 News. I know what that's like here in Denver. The Luminous Landscape and Smithsonian Earth. Using the power of photography to inspire interest in the environment and other cultures, She's presented keynote addresses or classes on various topics to schools, camera clubs, such as ours, right? The Intermountain Regional Headquarters of the National Park Service, the Crane Trust, Denver Audubon, Colorado Environmental Film Festival, and North American Nature Photography Association. This is a big one, 1992 honors graduate of Brooks Institute of Photography, holding a Bachelor of Arts degree in industrial scientific photography. As I mentioned earlier, she's provided our Lone Tree Club with fantastic presentations, judging in the past couple of years, and was the featured presenter during last year's annual conference for professional photographers of Colorado. This year's Lone Tree Exploring the Light show judge. The show's open through June 22nd. She has some workshops throughout the world. Texas bird photography, May 1st through 6th. Alaska, it will be in July. Tanzania in September. Mexico Magical Monarchs. If you haven't seen her monarch butterfly images, they're amazing. And that's January of 2026. And then also other locations that she does. Her workshops include Iceland, Antarctica, Bosque del Apache, and there's several other places. So that's all I had there. But like I say, quite a resume in that for this. So.
Sure. And I just got one thing. Congratulate all the Lone Tree Photo Club members who were picked to be in the Exploring the Light photo show. We had quite a few members from our club in the show. Pretty awesome.
Oh, Cheryl.
Oh, and I was just going to mention, there are a few trips that are not on my website. So I do prairie chickens in April. It's sort of a very exclusive opportunity. It's not, we've custom built blinds for photographers. So it's not like going to a lek where it's not ideal for photography. It's really well set up for photography. And then I do have a Costa Rica trip in May, if anybody's interested in that you could email me about. And then also I would encourage everybody to join my Patreon page. You can join for free. And I'm going to put a lot of content up there and announce trips on Patreon. And also I've got like a discount code right now for DxO software, and I'll put those kind of things, and you can join for free. So if you have any questions, you can email me and I'll send you all the info and links, but it's a great way to keep in contact. So.
Is it on your website?
The Patreon link is not on my website yet,
Okay.
but it's on my email in the signature. So if you just want to email me, or you can just search Patreon and you'll find me.
And if we can find that link, maybe we can get it in our next distribute, like the email distribution.
Oh, that'd be
something
great.
like that
I'll send it to you.
to members, just so we have something to put on there for that.
That'd be great. I'll do that.
Okay, great.
Okay, the first one is Barcelona's Bridge of Sighs.
All right. So I like the soft light and the subtle tones of this image. Whenever you're doing architecture, though, it is really nice to get your lines straight. So you can either use a perspective controlled lens, or you can do this in software. So I would just think about that and it's something you could do now. So you could play with the image. It does help to shoot a little bit wider if you know you're going to correct the perspective in software. But it is, you do have the walls leading, serving as leading lines into the picture. And I think it's nice to have the people as scale. That really helps with the overall image. I'm going to give this one, it looks nice and sharp all the way through as well. So that was handled nicely as well. I'm going to give this one an 8.
Chinese scarf dancer.
So I think using the black background on this is really effective. I mean, you've got colorful scarves that are, leading you toward the dancer. So that's working well. I like the motion that you see in the scarves. It gives a sense of movement. So all of that's working quite nicely. If I were going to make a few suggestions, I would say I would darken. There are some people that show up a little bit in the back. I would just go ahead and darken everything down so it's solid black in the background. And then it looks like there's a little more contrast maybe in the scarves than you need. So I would just maybe tone those down a little bit, but the color's nice and the lighting's nice. And it really is powerful with that deep, rich black.
Feathered refuge.
All right, so when we think of leading lines, if that's our theme, usually that's sort of leading us into the picture. And this sort of does lead us up to the bird, which again, I always say, identify your subject and then make sure everything else in the image supports the subject. So, from that standpoint, we could consider those branches kind of leading lines, but I think there's more in this image than needs to be there. I mean, certainly the tree off to the right doesn't need to be there. So, I probably would have cropped in quite a bit tighter on the bird and gotten rid of some of the extra branches and things that we don't really need to focus in. And then, the soft lighting, it could have a little more punch to it. So I mean, you handled the lighting as well as you could, but I might have punched up the color saturation just a little bit to make the bird stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to give this image a 7.
Footprints.
So again, in terms of the theme, if you're doing leading lines, we think more about that as leading you into the picture. So while they're walking in a line, I don't think it fits the theme as well. It would have been better to try and get in front of the subject so that they're coming toward you. So you kind of have that line to follow through the image. But it is, it's still a nice picture. I mean, the sand dunes are great. It's simple. There's good separation. Having odd numbers, the 3 camels works really well for an image like this. So those things are working to your advantage. On this screen, and again, every screen's a little bit different, I probably would have tried to open up the shadow areas just a tad bit more, especially on the front gentleman that's pulling the camels along. I think we could get a little more detail in him, but overall it's nice. It just doesn't fit the theme perfectly. I'm going to give it a 9.
Into the unknown.
So the color, I like the green color of this. I think that the color balance is off though a little bit, because if you look at the skin tones, they don't look, quite accurate. So I think you could go back and reprocess this and get your skin tones a little bit more accurate, and you'd still have these nice greens in the image. The higher angle's nice, but again, I think that kind of takes away from the theme of leading lines. So whenever you're thinking of trying to do leading lines, you probably want to get a lower angle and use like the pillars and the blocks to really guide you to the person, because I would say the person is your subject in this image. So, go off to the left and use the stairs and the rocks and the water to really lead up to your subject. I'm going to give this a 7.
Cable College, Oxford University, UK.
So another architectural image, and the tables work very nicely as leading lines into this image. So that's really working for it, and the lines are really quite straight too. So you've done a good job there. This is an image that I think would have benefited quite a bit from high dynamic range. It's a little bit on the contrasty side. I think we could have gotten maybe some better shadow detail in the back, and really kind of, if you could have brightened the back wall a little bit, that would have also helped to pull you into the image, using those lines of the tables to draw you back to kind of a focal point at the end. So I think really in the processing, there were some things that you probably could have done. And the people are okay. I might have waited for some of the people in the hallway to exit, or in the right side to exit. The people, I think, sitting add scale and everything to it, which works quite well. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Leading to a butte.
So again, in terms of lines, I do think you have enough contrast in the sandstone to kind of use these lighter colored lines that are in the rocks to lead you toward the butte. But again, I think, we probably don't need quite as much on each side. So I might have made this a vertical instead of a horizontal, and just really concentrated on these lighter patterns in the sand that are leading you toward the butte, because I don't think we need so much on the right or the left. So The color, I think, could have also been saturated maybe just a little bit more in the sandstone. I mean, the sky's nice and blue. You've got some lovely clouds. The time of day, if you'd waited for a little later light, I think that also would improve the color, but there's a lot of potential here. So I would go and try this again, or just do some cropping also in software, and that would probably help quite a bit too. I'm going to give this one a 7.
Milky Way, a balanced rock.
So you're definitely using the path as a leading line into this particular image. You know, we definitely have some challenges here in terms of pasting the sky and the foreground together. It doesn't look like it's just blending well. And it's a really challenging thing to do in software. So, you know, I think just practicing over and over again to try and get that to blend. And maybe even you might not even need to have so much light on your foreground. You could even darken that down a little bit more, which might make it a little bit easier to blend into the sky. But the Milky Way placement is nice. I think that's working well. You know, again, I don't know that we need quite so much. Maybe on the left, we could have cut a little bit off in your composition, but really it just needs some work in the processing area. I'm going to give this one a 6.
Northern Lights, full moon.
So the northern lights are fun. There's this great time to go photograph northern lights in the solar maximum. And the moonlight, you know, makes it interesting. It certainly provides, again, a line into the picture that we wouldn't have without the moon there. It is blowing out, though. We don't have any real detail in the moon itself or in the water. So that can be a bit, you know, distracting and take our attention away from the northern lights. So generally, if we're using a leading line, we want to, again, for the leading lines to help support our subject, which I would say are the northern lights. And it looks darker on the screen up here. I think that's actually a better portrayal of it on the big screen. So everybody's screen is going to look a little bit different. But the color in the northern lights is good. You've done a good job with that. Again, you know, compositionally, it's a little challenging with the northern lights because you can't control where they go. But I think your biggest problems are just the contrast between the dark and the bright of the moon. So trying to get some more detail into those areas would have been really helpful. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Sahara Sandstorm Brewing.
So I like the subtle lines in this. It's got such a nice feel to it. It's almost a pastel. It almost looks like a painting. It looks a little bit on the soft side. But again, it almost looks like a painting. So I'm assuming there was some sand blowing and that sort of thing. The line, I do like the way you handled it. You might have been able to move to the right a little bit and get the line to again lead you into the image a little bit more. But the colors are lovely. The pattern's very nice. I think all of that's working. I'd like to see it be a little bit sharper in some of the images. It's really tough to see on the screen, but I'm going to give it a 9.
Sunset by the Stream.
So this is another image where, you know, we don't necessarily have a really strong line that's leading us into the image if that's our theme. But, you know, we've got some nice lines that are in the pattern of the sky and the pattern of the clouds. And I know you're trying to kind of, I think, use the water section as a line, but I might have actually shown a little bit more foreground to see if there were some more patterns in your foreground that also would have led you into the scene. I think there's a lot more information on the right than you need. Your eye is going to go to the brightest part of the scene. And that's, you know, on the left-hand side where the color is and kind of drawing you back to the sky. So, you know, this would also benefit from, I think, some better processing. So playing with, you know, your shadow detail and maybe your saturation a little bit to bring it up. But I would go back to this same area and see if you could get a little more of the foreground elements to lead you back, and then really think about where do you want the eye to go and cut any other parts of the image out that you don't need to direct the viewer to that part of the image. I'm going to give this one a 6.
The Way West.
So this follows the theme of leading lines very well. I mean, we definitely have many patterns of leading lines that lead us through the image. It's photographed, not at the most ideal time of day. It would be nice to see this, either, I suppose it would be best, well, it depends on kind of what you're going for, either sunset, where you get sort of more a silhouette kind of look, or sunrise, but we've got nice patterns that are leading us back. There's not a real strong focal point at the end of the lines, though. So the patterns themselves are nice, but it's not a real dynamic image because we don't have a real strong, I think, subject here. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Trailside Wonders.
So we're definitely following the theme here again with the leading lines of the road back toward the deer. But again, really think about, the subject is obviously the deer, but we have a lot of space on the right-hand side that we really don't need. We can still keep enough of the leading lines, or we could have just stepped over to the right a little bit maybe, to put those lines more in the center, but we have a lot of negative space to the right that's not really helping us. So I would just crop that out. You could certainly do that. And the processing also, I think you could, you've kind of got muted colors here, and I think you could do a lot in processing to, brighten it up a little bit and maybe warm it up a little bit. It's looking a little on the cool side to me. So, try some of those things. I'm going to give it a 7. It does look nice and sharp.
Waiting in Silvera.
That is hard to say, isn't it? I know, I can't read it either. I'm glad you're having to do that part. Another night sky image. And so again, if we're talking about leading lines, we don't have really lines that are drawing us into the picture as much. So in terms of the theme, I think maybe you could have found an angle that would have had a stronger line that leads you through the image. But I like the lights of the building. I think that's working well, and the colors of the building. It certainly looks, again, it looks better on the bigger screen here, because the screen that I'm looking at is washing it out a little bit. So I am gonna judge it more on what I see up there. But it's nice and sharp. So it doesn't fit the theme real well. I'm going to give it an 8.
Waterway to the Sky.
So you've got some really nice color in the clouds here, and I can see how you were trying to use the water as a leading line, but I think if you could have, and maybe you couldn't have, it would have been nice to walk up to the edge, because the snow that's in the foreground is almost acting as a block to the leading line. And if you could have just gone up to the left and used the line going straight back, so you don't have anything really blocking your view, and that line would lead you right back to the color. I think that might have been a little stronger composition. And again, it's just, there's not a real dynamic other than the sky itself, which again, I think getting closer to the water and really using the reflection in the water to help draw your attention to the color in the sky, because I think that's more of the subject than the scenery is. I think that would have helped a lot, but it's nice and sharp, and you did a great job on your exposure. So I'm going to give it a 7.
You got 3 pictures. You need to pick one.
Okay, pick one as the
winner.
the winner.
Yeah.
For this category, this is beginner, intermediate
Okay,
color.
I'm going to say the dancer.
The dancer.
Mhm.
We'll go to advanced colors. First one, A Withering Journey.
So certainly you've got a nice road in there that gives us our leading line, and we've got nice fall color to work with. The processing on this image is, I think could have been done a little bit better to really bring out that color. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like the color is as vibrant as it could have been. So I would go back and reprocess this. You know, we've got really nice aspens, but they're just kind of, they look fairly muddy, and I think you could make them pop a little bit more. So really try with the processing to bring some of that out. So I'm going to give this a 7. It does look sharp.
Battle streamers.
So this is really a very good example of how breaking the rule of thirds really works. And you are definitely using all of the lines to focus you in on the center. I think that's working extremely well. You know, you've got good color, good sharpness through the image. It's composed nicely. I'm going to give it a 10.
Bird's eye view.
So again, I think the lines in this, they're not really necessarily leading lines. I mean, we do have lines that are going up, but it's not really leading you into the picture. So, you know, the light that's hitting the side of the rocks is nice. I like how that's working. Now you've got the two, I can't tell what those are on the top, but it certainly gives the image a sense of scale, which is really nice to have. I think it's more powerful to have those. I don't know if they're ducks or geese or anyway, doesn't matter. They give a nice sense of scale. I would have moved my composition a little bit more to the right though. We're crowding, I think the rock is really your subject, but we're crowding the rock on the right a little bit. So you could have just, and you may have cropped this in, so you may have a little more room there. So just give it a little more room to breathe, and that'll help a lot. It looks nice and sharp, and I like the contrast between the light and the darker trees. I'm going to give it a 7.
Divine shadows.
So you do have some shadows that are pointing up toward the candelabra from the crosses. And I think that's nice. But if I were going to shoot this again to make it even stronger with leading lines, I might have taken a lower perspective and gotten, you know, below the crosses pointing up so that those lines are really pointing directly up as you're looking up toward the light. You know, your eye again is going to go to the lightest part of the image, and those lines are directing you to, I think, what is your primary subject. So I think all of that's working well. It looks nice and sharp. I mean, it's not a real dynamic picture, but I think the way you handled what you had to work with, you did quite well. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Fall dry.
Again, I think, you know, the road is helpful. I don't think it's a particularly strong leading line because it's so hidden within the trees, but it's enough to give us the idea. And I think it is a nice element to kind of break it apart a little bit. The lighting, I think, is really beautiful on this. I like the way it's just kind of hitting the ridge line of the trees. And, you know, the shadow areas look nice. You've got good detail in the shadows and nice contrast. It's really quite a lovely image, and it does look sharp throughout. So I'm going to give this a 10.
Follow the leader.
You did a really good job of getting the horses to cooperate and line up. That's a challenge in itself. So I probably would have moved a little bit more in front of the horses to make those lines more powerful. I think you have 2 separate lines happening here. And I think if you'd just been able to get kind of in their path, it would have been maybe a little stronger in terms of the theme. The lighting, again, I would try and go back and do this with, you know, really, really early or really late light. I think you'd get better color. You wouldn't have the shadows so much underneath the horses. So, you know, it could use some, I think, help in that arena, but it looks nice and sharp. Compositionally, I would have left a little bit, you know, in the composition you have, I would have left a little more room on the right to give them a little more space to go into the image. But you know, I would go back and try this again at different times of day. And I think it could be a really, really nice subject to work with. I'm going to give it an 8.
Half mast.
So you're using here the lines that are formed by the gravestones to direct our attention to the flag. And I think that was very effective and a good use of the theme. You know, you've got good detail in your whites, you know, the clouds have detail, you've got nice shadow detail. So I think you've handled all of that really well. It's not a real powerful image. It's sort of subtle, but I think what you did with it, you did fairly well. I'm gonna give it a 7.
Hyatt Regency Atlanta.
So this is a really, really nice abstract image. I think it works extremely well. It certainly fits the theme. We've got the lines leading us up. It's got, you know, nice color. I like the contrast to the blue with all the yellows that we have in the building. You've got good detail in your highlight areas. It's really nicely handled. I think it's a very powerful image. I'm going to give it a 10.
Late afternoon photography.
So again, in terms of the theme, I would have liked to have seen these waves off to the right form more of a leading line. I think they're sort of off to one side of the image where, again, you know, and you might, sometimes you have to step in the water to get, you know, the composition that you really want. But I think that you could have maybe walked to the right a little bit more and use the waves as they crash into to create a line in sort of an S curve that leads you toward the people. So just think about, you know, repositioning yourself and wearing shoes that can get wet. I always, whenever I'm going to the beach, I make sure I'm prepared to get a little wet. And, you know, the people give it a nice sense of scale. The color, I think, could be adjusted a little bit. It looks a little bit on the green side, so I would play with your processing again, but it does look nice and sharp. I'll give it an 8.
Lights over Wilcox Street.
So we're very clear about what leading line we're following here. So I think that's, you know, an excellent use of the theme. It's a little hard to I think discern what your subject is. I mean, obviously you've got the lights at the end of the street, but I think it would be more powerful to have that more as like a recognizable car or something that makes it really stand out as your subject. I do like all the starbursts that you have in the lights going across. I think that gives it a nice look. But again, there's more information than we need, I think, on the right and the left, because we're really trying to lead the eye to sort of the end of the line. So I would have just maybe cropped it vertically and you know, played with that a little bit more and maybe tried to make a more definable subject at the end. So, but I'm going to give it an 8.
Night traffic.
I like the motion of the lights in this. Obviously, the motion is what's forming our leading lines here. I think that's working really well. It gives it nice color too. You've got good contrast in the scene. It looks like you do have detail in your bright areas and good shadow detail as well. I think I might have taken some of the information maybe off the left side a little bit. The lights that are on the left are pulling my eye a little bit away. I think they're so much brighter than the red lights we have right kind of down the center of the image. So I would think about that in terms of when you're setting up your composition, but I would try this again and work with it a little more. It's nice and sharp. I think it's got a lot going for it. I just think it could be a little bit stronger, and we probably don't need so much on the top either. I would just come in on the trains and just get the trains and lights. And I think that would be a lot more powerful than just the red lights. So I know it's hard for you to see. I'm trying to describe it as well as I can, but I think that would have made it just some cropping to crop out the left and the top. And I think it would have been a lot stronger, but I'll give it an 8.
Settling fog.
So the power lines certainly lead us, you know, into this image. It doesn't have, I like the foggy look. I think that's nice and moody. It doesn't have a lot of color though. So I would either try and pump up the color more, or I might just try and go to a black and white. You know, if you don't have a lot of color in the first place, it's often much better to just take the color out and work with the tonal values that you have. So I would consider that. I also probably would have stepped a little bit more to the left again to make sure those lines are really leading us into the image. They feel a little bit off to the left, but I like the simplicity of this. And it does look sharp through it. And I don't mind that you're losing the shadow detail because I think it is supposed to be more of an abstract image. You might have been able to just crop it horizontally though, and it might be more powerful as a horizontal. So I would look at that as a potential. I'm going to give it an 8.
Streaming in Morocco.
So again, if we're thinking about the theme, the lines that are really leading us into the picture are the lines of the pavement. And I probably would have approached this by using the water as the lines and maybe gone to the other side and use the water streaming in. So, those are things to think about when you're on a location like this. I mean, photograph it from multiple angles so that you can really see what works best. It's not, you do have sharpness in the foreground, but we're losing depth of field quite a bit on the way back. And for leading lines, I would expect to see more depth of field through the entire image. So, it's got some potential, but I think you just need to work it from a few different angles. So I'm going to give this one a 6.
The Watchman.
So it's a beautiful scene with some fall color and all of that's working well. I like the clouds and the soft light that are hitting the peaks. In terms of leading lines, again, I think, we've got too much brush and things as our foreground, where if we could have stepped over to the right and used the river more as our kind of center line to lead us into the image, that would have been helpful. But it looks sharp. So I'm going to give it an 8.
To the light.
So macro is always challenging, but I like the narrow depth of field. I think in flower photography, it's often better to use that really narrow depth of field. You do get a sense. I mean, it's not real strong in terms of leading lines, but you do kind of get a sense from the patterns that those lines are leading you into the flower. Although again, I think you could have lined up maybe a little differently to make that more powerful and more dramatic. It's really hard. I know these monitors, none of them are probably calibrated, so it's really hard to tell on color what the color's supposed to be without looking at a calibrated monitor, but it does look like the color could maybe be adjusted a little bit better. So I'm going to give this a 7.
Under the pier.
So you've got multiple lines, leading us into this image. And you've done a really good job on the processing here. I mean, we've got really nice shadow detail and you still have detail in your white clouds. And I like the fact that you used a really slow shutter speed to blur the water. I think all of that's working really, really well. The only thing I might have done is I might have tried to move a little bit to the left to get that line of, especially the shadow just directly going underneath. But there's a really nice feel to this image overall. I'm going to give it a 9.
Walking the line near the sand.
So we definitely have the leading lines of the road. And you're certainly trying to use, I think, more of a kind of rule of thirds approach. You don't have, the subject of the man pushing the bike dead center. But at the same time, I think it would have been more powerful to maybe come on the right of him and try and use the line that's just on the side and not so much in the center, because this center line is kind of pulling me back toward the road. And I think my subject is really over here to the right. So oftentimes when we're using leading lines, we really want to use those lines to help lead us to the subject, where this line is maybe pulling me a little bit more away from the subject. But I like the kind of pastel look of the colors, and I like the way that you handled the person. And I don't think it's necessarily bad to photograph from the back when you're trying to lead into a picture. Just think about your positioning again. I know sometimes it's difficult to get right in the right spot, but think about where those lines are leading the eye and are they really helping you get to your subject? And is that where you want the eye to go? So I'm going to give this a 7.
Winding through the hills.
In this particular image, I think, the time of day really perfect and the lighting is nice. I like again, it's kind of got a soft pastel look to it, which I think works quite well. You do have the line of the kind of dried creek that's going through the bottom, but it does feel a little bit crowded. So I would just give it a little more space in the foreground. It would show a stronger leading line if you had just given yourself a little more foreground. So, and I don't know what was there. I mean, it could be that you're cropping something out that just wouldn't have worked, but I think, overall it's nice. It looks sharp. The time of day is great. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 10.
All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 10s.
Okay, just pick one. I'm going to go with the Hyatt Regency Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask one question here
Sure.
real quick. Between the Watchman and Follow the Leader.
I'm going to do 14.
The Watchman.
Watchman. Okay, great. Thank you. And then so for the one other one that I have to break is between night traffic and late afternoon photography.
I'm going to go with 11.
Night traffic.
Yeah,
Night traffic?
It fits the theme better.
Okay.
So now we'll go to
Yep.
in pro color. Okay,
What's that?
first one is
Oh,
called
okay.
Arctic Reflections.
So again, in terms of the theme, we don't have a real strong leading line. I mean, there is a reflection in the water that sort of leads you, from the water back to the glacier. But I think the line could be a little bit stronger, perhaps, to fit the theme. I think the primary problem on this image, I think the composition is nice. That's working well. I like the spotty light. I think that's a nice touch on the mountains, but it does look like the highlights are blowing out, and that's on several screens that I'm looking at. So I think you need to just go back and reprocess this and make sure that you have detail in those brightest areas. You do have shadow detail, and the shadows can go dark, but we really don't want to blow out our highlight detail. So I'm going to give this a 7.
Dawn's Gateway.
So we do have some leading lines that are taking us kind of to the right. I think, though, it would have been more effective to move again over to the left. I really like the statue that we have on the left, but that feels more like a subject to me. And I feel like the leading line is kind of taking me away from that. So I might have made that just a stronger foreground element that then kind of leads back to the buildings. So, if you ever go back to this location, it's such a powerful statue and such beautiful architecture. I think just, again, trying different compositions and different positions. It does look like you did a pretty good job of getting your lines relatively straight. They could be a tiny bit straighter. And the color in the sky, again, you can't really control that, but going back night after night to get the most optimal sunset, I think would be helpful too. I'm going to give it an 8.
Desolate.
So I think this image is really effective in terms of the leading lines. I mean, the lines kind of curve around and they take us right up to the person, which is placed very, very well in the image. It's at the top. Again, we want those lines to really kind of lead us through the image and tell a story through the image. You might have been able to crop a little bit tighter. I'm not sure we need quite as much on the right side. You could have even made this image perhaps a square, and I think it would have been a little bit stronger. But I like the way we've got light right in front of the person at the top. So again, the lines are leading us up, and then that's the brightest part, and it really sets that person apart. So I think it's beautifully handled. I'm going to give it a 10.
The Villa Umbria.
So in this image, we do have sort of an S curve kind of leading line going with the trees. They're kind of zigzagging across. It's not a real strong pattern, but enough to get a sense that it's leading us toward the building. I think we do, I like the fact that the building's brighter and your eye does go back to the building. I don't think we need as much on the top. I think that's more area than we need in the composition, but I think you place the building in a good spot. And, the soft light works really well for this image. I'm gonna give it a 9.
We're going to go to black and white now, and we're going to start with the beginner intermediate, and this was called Des Elves.
All right, so again, we have architecture. We certainly have nice leading lines from the wood of the deck. And that's taking us back toward the mountain and the main building back there. So I think that's working really well for the theme. We're not straight on our lines, especially if you look at the left. We definitely have lines that we could have straightened up. So I think it would be more effective. And again, you can do a lot of that in software. So I would go back and try and straighten out the building so that it's not sort of tilting into the picture. And I think that'll make it a little bit stronger. But you've got good detail in your whites. It looks like, I don't think they're glowing out. I think you've got detail in the white of the snow. And you've got some people that give it a sense of scale, which works well. I might have on the right-hand side, I might have either just cloned those people that are sort of like cut off on the right, either clone them out or waited for them to move. I don't think that, again, if we have people in a scene, I'd rather see the whole person and not parts of a person. So, but the other people on the path in the back give it a nice sense of scale. I'm going to give it an 8. It looks nice and sharp throughout.
That was in stone.
So, but this is great for black and white too. I really like the black and white look of this. I think with the clouds that are in the sky, there's such a nice contrast to it. In terms of leading lines again, I think I would have come more to the front and see the line that we have where the buttons kind of start at the bottom and lead up. I think if you would have just come around and kind of used that line to help lead into the image a little bit more, I feel just like we're looking at a little too much from the side. So, just think about trying multiple positions whenever you're photographing something like this. But I like how you can see the foot. I mean, that stands out, really well. The contrast is nice. I think you've got, again, good detail in your whites, and you've got a good mix of tonal values. I'm going to give it a 9.
Fjord Wake.
No, I'm not sure if the wake line is really strong enough here to be a leading line. You almost, again, need to put that wake line right in the center so it takes you back toward the mountains. It's kind of off to the side, so it's kind of pulling us to the right and then bringing us back around. So really think about how we're leading our viewer through our images. Where does the eye is it directed? When we're using leading lines, we want to make sure those lines are really directing the viewer where we want them to look. But I think this image works well as a black and white. I like the patchy light on the back mountains. So I think if you had moved over and put that line a little more in the center and led it back to those brighter mountains in the back and maybe tightened up on the composition a little bit, it would have been stronger. So just think about those things when you go back out. But it looks nice and sharp. I'll give it an 8.
Night Ride.
In terms of the theme, again, I don't think we have real strong lines here. I mean, we do have, the horizontal lines going across, but we don't have any lines that are really leading us into the picture. So think about that when you're really trying to fit a theme, make sure that you're picking things that really do follow that theme. But I think the mood of the image is nice. I like the night scene. I think it's interesting to have some movement in the one person that's moving faster than all the others, but the others are still. So there's some nice things going for it there. And it does look nice and sharp. But again, in terms of cropping, I might have made this just a long panoramic because I don't think we need as much foreground. The foreground really isn't doing much for us. So think about cropping it a little bit differently. I'm going to give this one a 7.
Shoreline Stroll.
again, in terms of a leading line, I'm not sure we have a real strong leading line here. I mean, the sun reflecting in the water sort of does provide a line, but in that case, I might expect to see more of a ship in the back or something that would give it some scale or be our subject. I like the little person down here for scale. I think that works well, but our contrast on this is so bright. We're blowing out all of the highlight detail. And again, when you have white areas in the image, unless they're, small specular highlights, they really should have detail in them, which is where, in a situation like this, using something like HDR, which I know is more complicated when you have a person that's moving, but, that helps us get control over such a wide dynamic range. So, I like the feel of it. I like the, difference in the clouds. I think those are really strong. I like this person for scale, but it definitely needs some processing help. So I'm going to give it a 7.
The pews lead the way.
And there's no doubt in this image that we have leading lines. We're using those pews as lines that lead toward the stained glass. Your lines in the architecture are relatively straight, although they could be a little bit straighter. And whenever I'm doing architecture, I just in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever using, I just pull guides over to see if my lines are straight, because we have so much that we can do in our processing software to straighten the lines. So I would definitely consider that. The light here again is pretty contrasty. So whenever I'm doing something like this, I would be using HDR, because I can just get much better control over my tonal values if I bracket and go into an HDR program. So I would consider that, because we're losing detail in the pews, all those bright areas are blowing out. But you fit the theme nicely, and you do have good sharpness in the image. I'm going to give it a 7.
Vertical vision.
Well, we've got a bunch of lines in this image for sure. Definitely have lines. I'm not quite sure what's going on in the sky, but it's interesting. I like it. I think the patterns in the sky are interesting. I think, we've got multiple lines kind of going every which way and every which direction. And I might have simplified this image and either kind of moved to the side and concentrated more on the wires that are going to the white post, and maybe made the building either completely out of the picture or, to the side a little bit more, or I might have just gone to the building itself and looked straight up and used those lines of the windows. So I do think it's getting a little bit busy here, but it's nice and sharp. And I think it's an interesting sort of abstract image. I'm going to give it an 8.
We're going to move on to advanced black and white. This was called A Bicycle Built for One.
So again, we have a line in this image that's sort of leading us, but it's taking us kind of from the right. Do you see how it's coming from the right and pulling us around that way? Where again, if we could have gotten directly in the path of the bike rider and really used that line to take us, directly toward our subject, I think it would have been more effective. But it's a nice, I like the tonal values you have. You've got a really nice balance of the blacks and whites, and I think the processing is handled well. It works really well as a black and white image. You don't necessarily for this picture need a lot of depth of field. So I think blurring out the background and having that sort of go soft brings your attention to your subject more. So I think all of that's working well, and the subject's sharp. So that's good. But I would definitely try positioning a little bit differently. I'll give it an 8.
A break from ball.
Pets are always so cute. Again, I think this works really well as a black and white. You've got nice detail in the white fur. I like the shapes that you have of the lines. Now, to maybe fit the theme a little bit better, I might have tried to get the dog to sit back into the round shape a little bit more. I might have tried to put the head like right in the middle instead of off to the side where it is now, and just put it a little farther back. So again, we're kind of using this as a tunnel to go lead back to our subject instead of having our subject at the front of the lines. But I think, I think it's nicely composed. And I like the fact that you did blur out the background. You don't need to see a lot of depth of field here. You really want the attention to go to the dog itself. The lighting direction maybe could have been a little bit better, but black and white really helps with lighting issues. So the shadow coming across the back, I don't like as well. So I would have maybe rather had some light coming to fill in the front of the image a little bit, but the shapes are nice. I'll give it an 8.
Ascend.
So this is a really good example of leading lines, I think. You definitely are directing the viewer right up to the subject. And I think the positioning of the person is working really well in this. We've got good detail in our whites. We've got some nice black tones. You do have, again, it's architecture, so some of your lines are not as straight as they might be. It might be, you do the lines that are going horizontally seem to be straight. Your vertical lines are not as straight. So you might play with that a little bit and see, because you do kind of get a little bit of a tilting feel. But other than that, I think it's working really nicely, and it is sharp, and I like the way you use the lines and the architecture and the placement. I'll give it a 9.
By the dot.
I like the abstract kind of nature of this one. It's a nice combination of patterns. And, in terms again of the line, I think I would have moved over a little bit more to the left so that the line is really kind of directing us right through the image. Again, I feel like in a lot of these people, you're using your line kind of off to the side too much, where you really want to try and get your lines to direct you into the back of the image. So really think of that when you're trying to use leading lines. But I do like I like the patterns that you have and the stacking. I think all of that's working really well. I think the processing is good. Looks like we've got good detail in our whites, and some nice black tones. So, that's working well. And it is sharp. It looks really tack sharp all the way from front to back, which I think is really necessary in an image like this. So I'll give it a 9.
Cosmic alignment.
So I really love this image. I think it's abstract, but we've got great leading lines, obviously. The moon is a really nice touch at the top. I think that's very effective. It gives you a sense of it is a building and we're looking up the sky. The patterns are nice. We've got a good contrast between the blacks and the whites and some gray tones. So I'm going to give that a 10.
Curves.
So again, with the sand dunes, and sand dunes are great for trying to use the concept of leading lines. In this particular image, again, I probably would have tried to walk over to the right a little bit more and use that line so that it's not off to the right, so that it's more leading into the frame. And I think that your most powerful shapes are in the kind of the lower right corner of the image. I don't think we even need the stacking that we have going on in the back. So just with some cropping, I think we would have a more powerful image. So I would really consider going back and doing some cropping. You do have a mix of tonal values, but you could play with your contrast, I think, a little bit more in this as well. It does look sharp, at least in the front portion of it. And like I said, I don't think we really need most of that's in the back. It's just pulling my eye away. So I would just simplify this quite a bit, and I think you'll have a much stronger image. I'm going to give it a 7.
Destination unknown.
So we do have certainly a line that we're leading into the image. But again, I'm going to say it again. This seems to be like a theme of the night. We're really pulling from this side. And I think if you just stepped over a little bit more to the right, I think we would get a stronger shape and a stronger line coming into the picture. I like having some negative space to the right in the sky, but it might also be nice to have a little more dramatic sky for this image. So this would be a good location to go back to and wait to see if you can get more drama in the sky, because I think that you handled the tonal values so nicely under the bridge itself. We've got a really, really nice mix of tones in the image, but I think a little more contrast in the sky would make it more dramatic. And again, I would just move a little bit more to the right, just so we feel like we're leading into the image a little bit more. But it's sharp all the way through, and that's nicely handled. So I'll give it a 9.
F.
In this image, I like the round shape and the symmetry, and I think the 3 blades works really well. We've got odd numbers that are working. Again, I don't know that it's a leading line as much. It's not really leading us in, but we do have lines that are kind of drawing us back in the motor or the engine. So I like the abstract nature of it. I think you've got a good blend of tonal values, so it works really well for black and white. I think you cropped it nicely. I don't think you really needed to show much more. I think it would have gotten busy if you had shown too much more of the surrounding area. I'm going to give it an 8.
Ghost train.
So I like the motion of this image. I mean, I think it's nice it does have kind of an interesting feel to it by not having everything just tack sharp and letting the train itself have some motion. So I think that was handled very nicely. I still kind of feel like our lines aren't leading, but I also don't want you to get hit by a bus. So don't stand in the tracks to get in front of it, but it would probably be a better angle. This is one where, if you could get a higher angle and get more in front of it where you'd be safe and wouldn't get hit. I think it could be fun to play with that a little bit more, but I like the tonal values are good. I think you did a good job of processing, and I like the way you handled the motion. I'll give it an 8.
Luxembourg Cemetery.
Well, we certainly have leading lines in this image. I mean, that's really obvious, and this is again kind of more of an abstract image, and I like that feel to it. I think that we've got a nice blend of tones. I like the softer light. I think we have a nice blend of tonal values. We've got the whites and the darker grass. So the crosses are really popping with kind of the darker grass. I like the way you handled that. I'm trying to decide I don't mind having the sky in the background, but you also could have just cropped in and just focused on the crosses themselves and not even included that line in the background. So you could play a little bit with cropping that way. I also think for this image, I think I would have liked to have seen more depth of field. I mean, it does fall off in the back, and that can be a creative choice, but I think I might have liked to have seen it sharp, from front to back a little bit more. But I like the patterns. I'll give it a 9.
Man-made pyramid.
So again, in terms of the theme of leading lines, I would have approached this because this is a really interesting building, and you've got some really nice clouds that are reflecting in that. I think that's working really nicely, but I think it would have been a lot more effective for the theme and made a more dramatic and powerful image if you could have walked up to the building and shot straight up. We have lines that are kind of going in, but they're not really leading us in. And then we've got the contrail going across the top, where if you had shot straight up, it would have directed you right into that. And I think it would have been really, really dramatic, but your tonal values are nice and your processing is nice. So again, I would go back again when you have dramatic clouds like this and just try some different angles. I mean, don't be afraid to even, if you can, lie on the ground again, don't get run over or stepped on, but don't be afraid to experiment with really different angles. We don't always have to stand up to take a picture. Sometimes you want to lie on the ground and look straight up. So think about those things. I'll give it an 8.
Mending fences.
So the fence posts in this do create somewhat of a line, although, when they sort of block you in the foreground, it's not as much of a leading line as it is a block. So any time I'm trying to use a leading line, I'll try to make sure that there's nothing that's kind of creating a barrier for me in the foreground. I'll try and get past it so that I can really, again, have the lines pointing into the image and not blocking me. And I do feel like, I don't know if it's me, but I feel like I'm tilting in this image. And it's tough with trees because they do go every which way. So it's not like a building where you can really measure your lines and make sure they're straight. But this is where I would definitely use the level in my camera to make sure that I'm level so that if I have this feeling of tilting, it's not because the camera wasn't level, it's because of the way the trees are all lined up. But I might have just gone closer to the fence and not included the front slats of the fence and just tried to start with the fence posts that are behind that and use those to lead through the picture. But again, you've got, I think you did your exposure nicely and handled the processing nicely. I'm going to give this a 7.
Overpass to nowhere.
All right, so see how in this image we are under the bridge more? So this to me is a lot stronger in terms of the leading line. Where the other bridge, we were just not quite where we needed to be, but this I think works really, really well because we've got enough of the bridge that we're underneath it, but we also do have some of that negative space behind it. So I like this composition a lot. I think it's working really well. You may be, it's hard to tell again on the screens. You may be losing some detail in the white line. So you might in processing go back and just make sure you have some detail in that white. But I don't mind having the bright and the dark line and the different gray lines. I think it's working really well. I think this is quite powerful abstract, and your lines on the pillars are straight too, which is really good. So I'm going to give it a 10.
Road to Princeton.
Again, with that, I know I'm repeating myself over and over again, but I think it's just interesting how everybody seems to be looking at the lines kind of off to the side instead of really making it a part of the composition and really bringing us into the image. So we do have a line from the road, but it would have been better if we could have gotten again over to the right a little more, maybe at a higher angle, if at all possible, to really let that line of the road direct us into the image. This is quite contrasty. I don't mind it being contrasty, but I do think we probably could have opened up the shadows just a little bit more, especially at the curve of the road. I would like to see a little more detail. Whenever you have a black and white image, if there is a black area, you want to have a nice black, a nice white with detail. But I think in this area, it would have been nice to show a little more black with detail instead of having it block up so much. So I might have eased off a little bit on the contrast, but I do like, letting that sky go really dark. I think that's really effective. And it's so nice now with we used to have to use our filters on the lenses to manipulate the tonal value of the sky. And now we can take the color in image and digital. We can apply whatever filter we want and experiment with those sky values. But I like your choice of making that sky go really dark. So I'm gonna give this a 9. It's nice and sharp.
Schizophrenic Creek.
This line is much nicer too. Do you see how, we're coming in straighter to the line. So we're really using the pattern of the line to lead us into the image. So I think that's done really well. I don't know what if it's a log or something in the first part of the image. I might have actually just either cropped or just stepped up closer and gotten that out. Cause I don't know that log that's in the river at the left part of the image is really as effective as just starting. Do you see that? Starting ahead of it. So you could even just crop it and start at this nice curve that you have, and it draws you right into the image and it draws you back. And then, I think your cropping's fine in the back. You might also have been able to just crop down to where you don't include any of that background. You just kind of cut it off just with the darker trees in the background. And that, again, would really emphasize this line that you have going through the image. So experiment with this one with your processing and cropping. I think you've got snow with detail. It's a little hard to tell on the screen, but I would play with that and just make sure you have a good mix of tones. But I'll give it an 8.
Signs and aggressive waves.
So I really like the use of the slow shutter speed here. And I do think that helps to create the lines that we have in the waves. I mean, if you hadn't used a slow shutter speed, I don't think we would get really as much of a sense of the sweeping lines that are being created by the wave patterns. But this is, this is a really nice dramatic image. I think doing it in black and white was the best choice. I doubt that it was very dramatic in color. The one thing I would say about it, it looks like, and it depends again what screen you look at, but it looks like you've got good shadow detail. It looks like you've got a nice mix of tonal values. All of that's working well. I do kind of question whether I would keep that right pillar that's sort of out in the ocean in the image. It's a little bit crowded, so if you were going to keep it in, I mean, the line almost does kind of lead us to that, the wave patterns, but it feels a little crowded on the right. So I either would have let there be a little more room in the image on the right side so that we could see that, and that's probably the way I would have gone with the way the wave patterns are, or just cropping it out. But again, whenever we have elements in the scene, make sure you don't crowd them too close to the edges. Give everything enough space that it's comfortable. I think you did really well on your foreground space, but we're just crowded there. And my time is up, so I have to give it, I'll give it a 9.
Failed.
A lot of creative use of motion in the images tonight, and I like that. I think it works really well. I like the kind of ghost-like feel to it, and I like the way that we definitely have a leading line down the hallway. And again, look at this line; it's leading us right down the center. So we're not confused about where the line's leading us. So this is really a good example of using a leading line effectively. So it's leading us toward the back of the image. I like the pattern of the lights going down the wall, and I really love how the person is very perfectly placed with the light halo in the back of the image. So it's a very simple image, almost abstract, but I think it works really, really well. Maybe it could have a little more contrast, but I like it overall. I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay, you have 2 10s.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with 1.
And when we have a tie on the member voting for one of the places, and that will be between Ascend and Stormy Skies and Aggressive Waves. And that they're both 9s. I have those on there, and they both on the member voting tied each other also.
There's aggressive waves number 16 here.
3 and
Third
16.
one over there.
3 and
Yeah.
16.
So
Which one?
I'm going to go with 3. And I mean, they're both nice. I think 3 fits the theme better.
Okay, now we're at pro.
Oh, hey,
That's
this is our last, right?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. How are we doing on time?
We're doing good.
Pretty good,
That's
actually.
great.
Okay.
You've been clipping along.
All right. Well, that
Into-
timer really helps. I like the timer.
Into the abyss.
So this is really nice. I mean, images like this are usually very effective. Because they clearly, there are a lot of lines that are leading us into the image, and we've got a nice sense of depth here. The color, the tonal values are great. We've got patterns. There's nice whites and blacks, and so this image is working very well. And the sharpness is good. I think when you do an image like this, it's also very important to have sharpness throughout the whole image. So your depth of field and settings were very appropriate too. So I'm going to give it a 10.
Please welcome.
So this image is very nice too. And again, see now how we have that line just going straight in the middle. There's no confusion about where the line is leading us. It's very, very symmetrical. I think that was handled extremely well. I like the fact that we've got kind of darker grass and then kind of the gray pathway leading us to the white building. All of that is, our eye is always going to go to the whitest part of the image anyway, but this is very effective at how it just draws you right into the center. All of the elements are really working toward that. If there were anything I were going to do differently, I might have cropped some of the banding in the sky at the top. I think just pulls my eye away from the subject. So I would have just cropped in a little bit tighter and gotten rid of the cloud patterns that are at the top of the image. Because again, I mean, are they really helping to support the subject of the building? I don't think so. I think they're pulling my eye more away. So I would have done that. And again, we can crop in more panorama. You could probably take a little bit off the right and left if you wanted to, but you could also crop it as more of a panorama and make that work. So I'm going to give it a 9, but it's very nice.
To infinity, London.
So again, these lines, and so you can definitely see in this category, that everybody's got the line directions down much, much better. You know, we're leading you into the image with the lines and taking you straight to the back. So I think that's working well. Now, in this particular image, it's not quite as symmetrical as the other, and I would like to see this be more symmetrical, it is a little hard to do sometimes when you're, you know, in a dark place and you're trying to line everything up. But I'd like to see it just dead center with even amounts on each side. So, you know, where you're looking up like this, you're not going to get straight lines. So that doesn't bother me as much as just, I think the symmetry's off a little bit. I do like the fact that it's darker at the bottom corners, but I think it's a little bit too dark. I think we need maybe a little more shadow detail to lead us back into the image. So it might be a little heavy on the top. So we might have been able to include a little bit more at the bottom of the image, cut a little off the top, make it more symmetrical and brighten up, not too much, but brighten up those darker areas, just so we can see some detail coming in and leading us toward the back. And, you know, you can dodge and burn too. I mean, in this image, I would have lightened up those areas a little bit. And then I might have made the bottom of the back of the image brighter by, you know, dodging some of that area and just making it really pop. So I'm going to give this an 8. It's nice and sharp again. So
We are done.
great.
Now we can get you have the scores?
I do.
And then we can run through the images once we get to the end.
Beginner, intermediate, digital color.
This one is Barcelona Bridge of Sighs, Kathy Bala. Roger Frame, Chinese scarf dancer. Tamara Rimpley, Feathered Refuge. Carolyn Ryman, Footprints. Kathy Ellen Shin, Into the Unknown. Jeff Scott, Cabell College, Oxford University, UK. Jim Ritsima, Leading to a Butte. Roger Frame, Milky Way at Balanced Rock. Tony Lazzari, Northern Lights, Full Moon. Carolyn Ryman, Sahara Sandstorm Brewing. Gary Hubble, Sunset by the Stream. Jeff Scott, The Way West. Tamara Rimpley, Trailside Wonders. Tony Lazzari, Waiting in Savar. How do you say? Pardon? Okay, whatever.
SVOL.
Slovia.
So Volvo.
Weeks from Norway to get that.
Kathy Ellen Shin, Waterway to the Sky. Advanced digital color. We have Elaine Graves, A Withering Journey. Benjamin Evans, Battle Streamers. Michael Rhino, Bird's Eye View. Carino Zaragoza, Divine Shadows. Jeff Woodard, Fall Drive. Bruce Norman, Follow the Leader. Carino Zaragoza, Half Mast. Benjamin Evans, Hyatt Regency, Atlanta. Jane Richards, Late Afternoon Photography. Michael Rhino, Lights Over Wilcox Street. Bruce Norman, Night Traffic. Susan Langer, Settling Fog. Bruce Ryman, Streaming in Morocco. Jeff Woodard, The Watchman. Jane Richards, To the Light. Susan Langer, Under the Pier. Bruce Ryman, Walking the Line Near the Sand. Elaine Graves, Winding Through the Hills. Pro Color. We have Arctic Reflections by Steve Sorensen. Dave Purcell, Dawn's Gateway. Dave Purcell, Desolate. Steve Sorensen, The Villa Umbria. Beginner Intermediate, Black and White. We have Jeff Scott, Des Alps. Tamara Ripley, Echoes in Stone. Tony Lazzari, Fjord Wake. Tony Lazzari, Night Ride. Gary Hubble, Shoreline Stroll. Jeff Scott, The Pews Lead the Way. Tamara Ripley, Vertical Vision. Advanced Black and White. Bruce Norman, A Bicycle Built for One. Benjamin Evans, A Break from Ball. Susan Langer, Ascend. Jeff Woodard, By the Dock. Carino Zaragoza, Cosmic Alignment. Jeff Woodard, Curves. Elaine Graves, Destination Unknown. Benjamin Evans, F3F. Carino Zaragoza, Ghost Train. Bruce Norman, Luxembourg Cemetery. Bruce Ryman, Man-Made Pyramid. Elaine Graves, Mended Fences. Jane Richards, Overpass to Nowhere. Michael Rhino, Road to Princeton. Bruce Ryman, Schizophrenic Creek. Jane Richards, Stormy Skies and Aggressive Waves. Susan Langer, Veiled. Okay, Pro, Black and White. Dave Purcell, Into the Abyss. Dave Purcell, Queen's Welcome. Steve Sorensen, To Infinity London. And that's it.
All right. For those of you at home, we will end the meeting. You guys have a good night.